The Geet Ruler Episode Number 101 Explanation. Brilliant light emitted from the spiritual treasure mountain. It was as if a light screen that shrouded the entire mountain range. The gaze of Mu Chen and his group fixed on the sky of the spiritual treasure mountain. As the light gathered, there was light figure that slowly appeared. There's still people living in the spiritual treasure mountain? Shock rose in the heart of Mu Chen and his group. Could it be that even after all these years, there is someone still alive from the Divine Wood Palace? Under the nervous gaze of Mu Chen and his group, the light became clearer in the sky, before turning into a figure of light. That light figure seemed to be an old man as he stood on the sky. He said nothing, which caused the originally bustling spiritual treasure mountain to be quiet. No one dared to speak a word. Those that were sent flying earlier on wiped the traces of blood from the corner of their lips as they looked at that light figure in astonishment. Although they did not know who the light figure was, with the Divine Wood Palace's strength, what they left behind, even casually, was not something that they could deal with. Spiritual energy surged in the surroundings of Mu Chen, Luo Li, Wen Qingxian, and their group as their eyes became filled with alertness. The instant something went wrong, they would instantly retreat. No one is allowed to enter the important place of the spiritual mountain. Everything will go by the rules and regulations of the Divine Wood Palace. Just when Mu Chen and his group raised their guards, the elderly light figure spoke. There wasn't any emotions in his voice, which made it sound especially empty. But just that alone could make one's hair stand on end. It doesn't seem to be a living person. Hearing that voice, Mu Chen's expression slightly changed as he gazed towards the elderly man. He realized that the latter did not wear any expression on his face, his eyes were especially empty, without any human emotion. Perhaps this is a spiritual clone left behind by a certain formidable figure of the Divine Wood Palace. Luo Li said softly. When Qingxian stealthily breathed out in ease. It was fine as long as that was not the original body of that old demon. Otherwise, they would only flee for their lives. However, with him obstructing our path, there's no way for us to make our way past him. Xu Heng said softly from the side. He clearly saw the scene of those unlucky fellows earlier. Furthermore, there were still some people being trapped. Who knows what awaits them? Didn't he say that everything will follow the rules and regulations of the spiritual treasure mountain? Mu Chen said softly as his eyes flickered. What's the rules and regulation? Luo Li and Wen Qingxian were a little blank and at a loss. Mu Chen shook his head as his gaze fixed onto that light figure. There are a total of 9 levels in the spiritual treasure mountain. The higher the level, the treasure awaits would be more precious. Every single spiritual treasure has a puppet guarding it. Only by defeating the puppet can one leave with the spiritual treasure. Those that fail the challenge will be trapped for half a year as punishment for not working hard in their cultivation and yet biting off more than what he or she can chew. Just when everyone was in doubt, that light figure spoke. So, those are the rules. Mu Chen and his group then understood. But then shortly after, they were startled by the punishment. Trapped for half a year? If that happens, then they would not be able to participate in the Great Spiritual Academy tournament that would continue to occur. It seems like the rules are meant to encourage the disciples of the Divine Wood Palace to cultivate. Perhaps they have never imagined that the Divine Wood Palace would fall into such a situation. None of us here is a disciple of the Divine Wood Palace, said Wen Qingxian. That means that those fellows have to defeat the puppet guarding the spiritual treasures. If they win, they would be able to obtain a treasure from the stone platform, but if they lose, Mu Chen grinned. Luckily, he did not rashly take action earlier. Otherwise, they might have been trapped to battle the puppet, since it was an extremely dangerous matter for them. They, themselves, had no idea how powerful the puppets guarding the spiritual treasures were. Let's take a look and see, then. Mu Chen said solemnly. If the punishment was that heavy and the strength of those puppets were extremely fearsome, then he would have to give up on the 9 sons divine Lingxi, no matter how unwilling he was, since he had no time to be trapped in this place for 6 months. When Qingxian and the rest nodded in agreement. Right now, they could only wait and see. As Mu Chen and his group were discussing, light abruptly surged from the layers on the stone platform. Those that had charged onto the platform all experienced a light figure shooting from the ground. After a brief moment later, the light dissipated and there were puppets being clearly seen by everyone. The puppets were black in color, as if they were forged from black metal. There were also profound runes that covered their bodies, flickering with faint light. Vaguely, there were powerful ripples that were slowly being emitted from them. The eyes of Mu Chen and his group were fixed on those black puppets. However, the ripples around those puppets were especially veiled. Henceforth, they could not gauge the strength of those puppets. Furthermore, those puppets were not identical. Those puppets that were located on the higher layers were emitting an even more powerful pressure from them. Mu Chen gave a glance. The spiritual treasure mountain had 9 levels and no one intruded into the 8th and 9th level. Hence, no puppets appeared on them. 2 people had charged onto the 7th layer and beneath the lower levels, there were more puppets, since there were more people that intruded those levels. Within the spiritual treasure mountain, those that were trapped on the stone platform were somewhat panicked when they heard the words of that light figure from before. If they failed their challenge, they would have to be trapped in this place for half a year. This kind of price was too heavy, since the Great Spiritual Academy tournament would have ended by then. I refuse to believe that the puppets here are that powerful. After so many years have passed, I bet that their strength has diminished. Perhaps the consequences of failure were too serious. One of the intruders that entered the 5th level barked with his face paled as he took a step forward. A majestic amount of spiritual energy swept out. The thickness of the spiritual energy had already reached the level of heavenly completion stage late phase and he was only a step away from human body disaster. The sole of his foot stepped forward as his figure swept out, throwing a palm at the same time. His scarlet-red spiritual energy was like a flame as he attacked the black and gold puppet. Scarlet spiritual energy surged out and the light in the empty eyes of the puppet seemed to have condensed. In the next instant, it took a step forward. It did not try to dodge as its black metal palm was thrown out similarly and the puppet's attack clashed with that person's. Bang! A huge collision solemnly rang out as the light exploded. Thereafter, everyone could see the intruder's body flew out with fresh blood spewing from his mouth as he heavily fell on the ground with his face paled. Everyone was in silence. Quite a number of people had astonishment in their eyes. Just one move was all it took to defeat the intruder. Clearly, the strength of that puppet had reached human body disaster, but that was only just the 5th level. Challenge failed, imprisoned for half a year. The elder's voice resounded in the sky and with a sweep of his hand, shackles of light shot out and tied themselves onto the intruder's body. Thereafter, without caring for his miserable shrieks, the ground cracked open, bit by bit, as his body fell into the hole. In the next instant, the ground was restored to its original appearance and the shrieking was silenced. Countless people had their faces paled, especially those that had already intruded. I don't want to challenge anymore. Some people could not stand the punishment as they shouted with their faces paled. Shortly after, they turned around and ran. Escaping before the battle, judged as challenge failure. 6 months added onto the imprisonment time. The light figure lightly spoke. Shortly after, he made a wave with his hand as countless shackles of light swept out and tied onto those that tried to escape and were swallowed by the mountain. With that, all those that were trembling from fear that were originally thinking of escaping all held their steps. Escaping before the battle added another 6 months to the imprisonment time. That would be an entire year of being imprisoned in this land with no living being. Wouldn't that be harder to bear than dying? Let's risk it all. They could not retreat and only fight for their lives. All these people still had some unyielding spirit in them. Boom! Boom! Powerful spiritual energy exploded from them, and on the stone platform, there were human figures that charged towards those cold puppets and huge battles broke out. There were spiritual energy ripples that exploded on the stone platform, along with astonishing attacks that were released without any restraint. In less than 10 minutes, there was a continuous amount of people that failed their challenge. Those that failed would, without a doubt, be dragged into the mountain and imprisoned. The shrieks coming from them were extremely sharp. However, not everyone failed their challenge. There were those that were lucky and were spared from it, since they did not intrude onto the higher levels. Thus, the puppets that they encountered weren't too powerful. After a round of bitter battles, they actually managed to win the battle. When they obtained their victory, the light screen that shrouded them slowly disappeared. As the light screen disappeared, there were people that cried from being too emotional. Under their panic, they had actually forgotten about their reward and escaped, no longer daring to approach any closer. Mu Chen did not pay too much attention on the battles of those levels. His attention was focused on the 7th level, since there were 2 people that intruded onto that level. Out of those 2, one had undergone his human body disaster. However, his strength had only managed to exchange several moves with the puppet before being defeated. The strength of the other person was slightly more powerful, since he had the strength of spiritual energy disaster. With his strength, he could be considered as an elite that could become the captain of a team. However, his strength at spiritual energy disaster did not get him too much advantage from the puppet. The puppet possessed plenty of fighting experience and also knew a powerful deity-tier spiritual art. The puppet's powerful attack had thoroughly suppressed that spiritual energy disaster expert. That person had undergone a miserable fight. That fight lasted for half an hour, before he had exhausted all of his spiritual energy. Despite that, he still could not emerge victorious. Fortunately, when his spiritual energy was thoroughly exhausted and he could no longer move, that puppet had also suffered serious damage with cracks on its chest. As it walked, it was swaying left and right, as if it was about to shatter. A draw. As you are unable to win, you won't be entitled to your reward. However, you have avoided your imprisonment. Up in the sky, that elder faintly said as he watched the scene. Hearing the judgment, that person felt relieved. He dragged his body that was filled with wounds and exhausted spiritual energy as he swayingly flew in the air before he was helped by his teammates. When the battle ended, nearly all of the battles on the spiritual treasure mountain had also ended. More than half of those that had intruded were dragged into the mountain and imprisoned. Outside the spiritual treasure mountain, there was silence. All those teams whose eyes were filled with greed earlier on were drenched in cold sweat as they patted their chests. It was fortunate that they were a step slower. Otherwise, who knows whether they would end up being imprisoned as well. Mu Chen also fell into silence. The puppet on the 7th level could cause a spiritual energy disaster expert to be in such a state. If he wanted the 9 Suns Divine Lingxi, he would have to challenge the 9th level. Looking at this scene, should he give it a try or should he escape? If he had succeeded the challenge, he would be able to obtain the 9 Suns Divine Lingxi. However, if he failed, he would be imprisoned. Just what should he do? Outside of the spiritual treasure mountain, although it was still filled with people, the atmosphere was especially quiet. Quite a bit of teams had their faces paled as fear flashed in their eyes. The greed that filled their eyes earlier had been replaced with fear. Although the treasures were extremely tempting, their lives were more important. Although they would not lose their lives if they failed the challenge, they would be imprisoned for half a year. That sort of punishment was even more harsh than death. Naturally, they were not the only ones. Even people like Wang Zhong and Wu Yingying had grave expressions. With their strength, the layers beneath the 7th level were not too hard for them. However, their motive did not stop at that level. If there were any treasures that would attract their attention, it would be the treasures from the 7th level and up. But, in order to obtain those, they would have to face powerful puppets, and puppets of those levels were enough to pose a threat to them. The entire spiritual treasure mountain was exceptionally quiet, without any noise. Luo Li took a glance at Mu Chen. She knew that Mu Chen desperately needed the 9 Suns Divine Lingxi on the 9th level. The battle would be extremely dangerous. However, with Mu Chen's character, it was impossible to get him to give up on it. The young girl's eyes flickered as she tightened her grip on the Luo God sword. Are there any more disciples that wish to take the challenge? In that silence, the light figure elder's voice indifferently resounded from the sky. There wasn't any hint of emotion in his voice. Every single team exchanged glances as they did not dare to move. Although those teams with decent strength could challenge those of the lower level, the failure was still too severe, which made them especially frightened. Mu Chen clenched his hands as light flickered in his eyes. Although he was still struggling within his heart, the 9 Suns Divine Lingxi was too important for him. If he gave it up, who knows when the next time would be for him to find it again. Let me challenge the 9th level puppet. Luo Li suddenly spoke as she smiled towards Mu Chen with her hand tightly gripping the Luo God sword. Although the puppet would certainly be powerful, have trust in me. I can defeat it and will definitely bring that 9 Suns divine Lingji out. Mu Chen was stunned from Luo Li's words. Even when Qing Xian, Xu Huang and the rest were stunned. Luo Li plans to take the risk? Luo Li gently smiled as she looked at Mu Chen. Okay? No, it wasn't Mu Chen that replied, but when Qing Xian as she frowned her brows, forget it, leave it to me. Although it will be a little hard, I am a risky person. Her words contained pride. Indeed, she did have the qualification to speak such words. As the captain of the team that was once ranked first, perhaps all the teams in the Great Spiritual Academy tournament knew that when Qing Xian possessed extremely powerful strength, although she had yet to truly reveal them. However, no one would belittle her. Let me do it, I can deal with it. Faced with Wen Qingxuan's pride, Luo Li shook her head. You? Wen Qingxian was a little angered. Just as the two girls were arguing, Mu Chen, who had not been talking at all, deeply inhaled a mouthful of air. Shortly after, he shut his eyes and a brief moment later, he gradually opened his eyes. When he opened his eyes, the struggle and hesitation within his eyes disappeared. What replaced them was a firm gaze that fell onto the peak of the spiritual treasure mountain. There wasn't any more of the fear in his eyes. Although he could not determine how strong the puppet would be on the 9th level, he knew that if he fell back here, it wouldn't be beneficial for his cultivation. On the road to an expert, if one didn't have the courage and confidence to strive forward, he would definitely not succeed. The current him needed to be constantly strengthened as he still needed the strength comparable to a heavenly sovereign in order to save his mother from the mysterious land that even his mother feared. He had already declared that he wants to become an unrivaled expert that could protect the girl he loves, blocking out all of the storms for her. His path to become an unrivaled expert had just begun, so there was no path of retreat for him. The previous him had too much doubt, since he did not wish to be confined in this place for half a year. When he heard that Luo Li actually wanted to take the risk for him to obtain the 9 Suns divine Lingxi, the doubt in his heart was ruthlessly removed from his heart. He knew that Luo Li had seen the struggles in his heart. Since when had he become so fearful? Since when had he lost the absolute sharpness that he had in order to become strong? The real path to being an expert was not being so cautious like this and hesitating. If he had lost that spirit, it would be impossible for him to break through the layers of obstruction that was holding him back from becoming an expert. Light surged within Mu Chen's black pupils. He still stood quietly in the sky. However, his slender figure became as tall and towering as a mountain at this moment. In that instant, a sharp aura was emitted from that youth's body as if it was a divine spear that was about to pierce the sky and universe. When Qing Xian and Luo Li stopped their argument as they were a little astonished, looking at Mu Chen. Although he remained silent, they could sense the sharpened aura from the youth. Within that sharpness, there were also confidence and courage. Like a soaring eagle, even if the wind resistance was coming at it from all directions, it still chose to soar and fly high. Luo Li dumbfoundedly stared at Mu Chen's face. The edge of the youth's face was filled with sharpness. This made her suddenly laugh softly as she could feel the changes within Mu Chen's heart. Truthfully, after the Great Spiritual Academy tournament began, she sensed that Mu Chen had been more cautious with things. Although it was good to be this way, she clearly preferred the previous prideful youth more. The him before could sense the hesitation within himself. However, she did not wish to see Mu Chen fall into that kind of situation, so she willingly stood out to obtain the item that Mu Chen wanted. However, it was a pity that he seemed to have sensed something. So he's not going to even give me the slightest chance to perform myself. The young girl's lips rose as her clear and crystal-like pupils were filled with a smiling expression. When Qing Xian by the side was also looking at Mu Chen in astonishment. She was shocked with Mu Chen's changes. When Luo Li made that previous suggestion, she was actually upset with Mu Chen in her heart. Her character wasn't the same as Luo Li, and from the way she looked at it, if Mu Chen cared about Luo Li, he would not let her to speak such words. Since he loved her, he should stand before her, no matter what, and block anything that might possibly cause any harm to her. When Qingxian saw Mu Chen for the first time, seeing the guy that shook Luo Li's heart, not only was she disappointed, she was also not satisfied with him. She did not like someone that was being so cautious. She admired someone that would face forward, no matter how many difficulties there were, being arrogant and did not care too much about the cause and effect. Although the heaven and earth was wide and vast, he could control the cloud and rain with a flip of his hand. That was the character that she admired. When Qingxian looked at Mu Chen, the current youth looked like a spear that could pierce the heavens and nothing could obstruct it from doing so. He was slowly fitting into the character that she liked. Only now did she understand why Luo Li would fall for him. Perhaps this is the Mu Chen from the spiritual road. Mu Chen extended his hand and pulled onto Luo Li's jade-like hands and smiled. He did not say anything and only had the smile hung on his face. Luo Li, however, gently smiled as she shook her head. Mu Chen turned his head around as he looked at Wen Qingxian. When the latter looked at him, her original attentive gaze instantly shifted as she had disdain on her lips. "You want to snatch something of mine? I do not agree to it." Mu Chen smiled. "TSK, who wants it?" Wen Qingxian said with disdain. Shortly after, she understood the meaning behind his words as she firmly gazed him over. "Today, I will obtain that 9 suns divine Lingxi." Mu Chen looked towards the peak of the spiritual treasure mountain that had endless light emitting off of it. He extended his hand and made a light grasp as pride appeared in his eyes. "Is there anyone that still wants to take the challenge?" Up in the sky, that light figure elder indifferently repeated. "Ha ha, senior, let this junior challenge it." Mu Chen laughed as he took a step forward. His laughter was like lightning as it rang throughout this heaven and earth. Mu Chen's voice instantly caused the other teams to be astonished. Shortly after, astonished gazes shot over. Mu Chen did not pay any attention to those gazes. His figure moved as he turned into a streak of light and charged towards the peak of the spiritual treasure mountain. Heavens, he's chosen the 9th level. Countless cries of surprise resounded. Wang Zhong's eyes instantly concentrated. He narrowed his eyes as he looked at Mu Chen. That fellow really dared to move? If he fails, will he be able to endure the consequences? Wu Yingying was staring at Mu Chen's figure as well. The youth's slender figure that was emitting a sharpness as well as his clear and fearless voice made her a little absent-minded. Shortly after, she couldn't help gritting her teeth. That bastard is trying to get the limelight? If he is imprisoned, how will I look for him to get my debts repaid? Rustle. Under the countless gazes, Mu Chen's figure that had turned into a streak of light had charged onto the 9th level without any fear. Thereafter, he was covered in countless lights. Up in the sky of the spiritual treasure mountain, that light-figured elder was still indifferent as he stood on the sky. However, no one had noticed that when Mu Chen's figure charged towards the 9th level, there was a slight ripple in the eyes of that elder. A streak of light drew across the horizon and under the countless gazes, it flew into that layer of light screen. Thereafter, Mu Chen's figure landed onto the stone platform's 9th level. When his feet touched the ground, Mu Chen raised his head as he gazed towards the end. There was a jade stone lotus layer with endless light being emitted off of it. It was like a brilliant sun as Mu Chen's gaze penetrated through the dazzling light and onto the item within. It was a brilliant perfect object that made others unable to open their eyes. It had a jade-like stone torso that was sparkling and translucent. As the fine branch and leaf swayed, 9 light balls faintly trembled as if they were 9 suns that rose up. Even the light in the sky was inferior compared to it. A pure spiritual energy ripples that could make the heart of others palpitate were being released from the 9 blazing suns and were constantly flow out like waves. Around the jade stone lotus layer, even the space was twisted from the pure spiritual energy. That was the 9 suns divine Lingxi. Mu Chen was yearning to get that treasure even in his dreams. Ha! Mu Chen looked at the 9 suns divine Lingxi as he inhaled a deep breath. Thereafter, he forcefully shifted his gaze as he suppressed the surge in his heart. He knew that if he wanted to obtain that 9 suns divine Lingxi, he would have to undergo an earth-shaking battle. Amen. Just when Mu Chen was suppressing the tidal waves in his heart, a light that was hundreds of feet high shot out from the other end of the vast stone platform. That light looked as if it penetrated through the spiritual treasure mountain that could be seen within 100 miles. Mu Chen's line of sight was fixed on that light as faint pressure slowly emitted off of it. That pressure was not strong, but the pressure was something that could not be seen through, which caused the hearts of others to spread out and, in the end, affect one spirit, causing the fighting intent to dissipate. Majestic spiritual energy surged out of Mu Chen's body. Black lightning flickered as it covered Mu Chen's body. Vaguely, there were sounds of thunder booming. Clearly, Mu Chen had used his lightning god's physique. Facing with an opponent of this level, he did not dare to be the slightest bit lax. Outside the spiritual treasure mountain, there were gazes that shot towards his direction as they raised their heads in expectation. They all wanted to know how powerful the puppet of the 9th level would be. As countless gazes attentively watched, the dazzling light started to disappear. As the light disappeared, there was a fuzzy figure that also vaguely appeared. Boom! A black figure walked out of the dissipating light. It was a puppet that was pitch black, as well as flickering with a metallic luster. However, compared to all those previous puppets, this puppet was clearly much more perfect. Its figure was as slender as a human figure and a sharpness was being emitted off of it. On its body, dark purple runes flickered with faint light as the eyes of the puppet were also glowing in faint purple luster, emitting the smell of danger. There was a pitch-black long spear being wielded in its hand. The rather simple spear tip had a blade. Clearly, it was a weapon used to kill. The puppet was a size smaller compared to all the previous ones. However, anyone could sense the fearsome power contained in its slender body. This is the puppet of the 9th level. Someone muttered with a pale face. Judging on the pressure from the puppet, perhaps it possesses the strength to rival spirit disaster experts. It is indeed powerful. However, I wonder, what is the exact rank of spirit disaster strength it possesses? Outside the spiritual treasure mountain, there were people discussing with voices that could not cover up their astonishment. Mu Chen closely stared at the puppet before him. As it clearly appeared before him, Mu Chen could sense the threat getting heavier. As a cause, the muscles in his body were tensing up as the demonic dragon-devouring spear appeared in his hands. This puppet really did possess the perfect strength of a spirit disaster. Spirit disaster was the last gateway towards sovereign realm. It was also the hardest amongst the 3 sovereign disasters. Be it the human body disaster or the spiritual energy disaster, there was something that one could depend on. However, the spirit refers to a cultivation as spirit. Condensing the essence, aura, and spirit were the most important factors. The instant something went wrong with the spirit, it would be fatal. Accurately speaking, there were 3 grades in the refinement of the spirit. First grade was refining the human body through blood fire, second being the refinement of spiritual energy through the spiritual fire, and lastly, refining the spirit through soul flame. That was basically expanding the human body disaster and spiritual energy disaster, and experiencing it with the spirit once again. Experiencing the 3 grades of refinement again, the spirit would grow stronger. After fully experiencing the 3 refinements, the spirit would start to change, laying down the best foundation for sovereign realm. Judging from the strength of this puppet, it probably possessed the strength of 1st grade spirit disaster. 1st grade spirit disaster. The gaze of Luo Li, Wen Qingxian and the rest turned grave. Although they had guessed earlier on, when the truth fell, they could not help feeling shaken in their heart. Through the remnants that were left in the continent, all the teams in the Great Spiritual Academy tournament had a shocking growth in strength. But even till now, the majority of the pinnacle participants in this tournament had yet to step into spirit disaster. Take Wang Zhong and Wu Yingying for example. Although they stood at the peak of the spiritual energy disaster and possessed the qualifications to come in touch with the spirit disaster, they were waiting for a chance so that they could successfully step into the spirit disaster. But that was in the future, not the present. In this tournament, those that dared to say that they possessed the strength to fight this puppet would not surpass 3. This divine wood palace really did leave something behind. When Qingxian said softly. Luo Li nodded. What if he loses? When Qingxian looked at Luo Li. Mu Chen's strength was only at human body disaster. Even if he possessed many means, trying to defeat a first-grade spirit disaster puppet was definitely not a simple matter. However, the instant he fails, he would be imprisoned for half a year. I believe in him. Luo Li lightly smiled as she paused for a brief moment before continuing. If he loses, I will lead the team and enter the finals. After I have killed Ji Xian, I will return here to wait for him. Wait half a year for him. When Qingxuan's brows twitched, Luo Li nodded as she helplessly smiled. Half a year, I still have that amount of time, at least. Although that might be the last period of time for my last bit of freedom. Her last sentence was extremely soft that not even Wen Qingxian could clearly hear it. What's so good about that fellow for you to treat him so good? Wen Qingxian was a little helpless. With how outstanding Luo Li was in the future, even in the Great Thousand World, she would definitely shine. However, she was willing to be by Mu Chen's side, hiding her brilliance. Luo Li lightly smiled as her charming eyes glanced towards the slender figure. Wen Qingxian only saw the current her, but not the her before she entered the spiritual road. Or to say, the her before she had met Mu Chen. Her world was dark, and when she was young, her father died in battle. The one that was originally her solid ground had fallen. Her mother was too heartbroken that her health gradually fell. The other royalties of the Luo god clan had no achievements, they were like insects that ate into the wood. The heavy burden of the clan could only fall onto her shoulders. Her grandfather had temporarily carried it for her, but she was well aware that she had to shoulder it one fine day. However, she had no confidence. Back then, she even thought that when that day came, it might be the day that she collapsed. Thereafter, she met him in the spiritual road and learned confidence. In her darkest moments, he was like a sun that shined on her and slowly expanded, finally lighting her world up. Ever since she returned from the spiritual road, her changes made her grandfather shocked. Perhaps this was the reason that he compromised and gave her 2 years of freedom. All the changes was brought to her by him. Therefore, she had no reason not to love him so much. Mu Chen is exceptionally outstanding. I believe that if you spend enough time with him, you will fall for him as well. Luo Li smiled as she looked at Wen Qingxian. Wen Qingxian glanced at the figure in the distance as she said with no expression on her face, "This joke is not funny at all. I have seen too many talented people. Furthermore, aside from the 5 great spiritual academies, the Great Thousand World is very vast." Luo Li did not retort as she gave a smile. "Seems like your background is not that simple as well." When Qingxian indolently spread her fine arms out as her golden close-fitting armor shaped her prideful curves. She did not comment any further on the topic as she suddenly glanced towards the peak of the spiritual treasure mountain. There were frightening spiritual energy fluctuations that surged through the skies from that direction. Are they finally fighting? When Qingxian closely stared at the slender figure as her rosy lips rose into a prideful smile. "Mu Chen, let me see how you are so worthy of Luo Li's evaluation." Boundless spiritual energy was like gale as it swept out on the stone platform. Vaguely, there was the sound of thunder rumbling. Mu Chen held onto the devouring dragon demonic spear as both of his eyes fixed onto the puppet that stood before him. His body flickered with lightning. Under his muscles was a powerful energy. The moment he moves, he would be able to instantly unleash astonishing destructive power. Faced with Mu Chen's alerted glare, the eyes of the black metallic puppet flickered with purple light. There was a pressure that was slowly being emitted from those eyes. On the platform, the puppet and person did not make any movements as they stared at each other. However, the situation only lasted for a brief moment. The puppet did not have any wisdom. Therefore, it did not know the meaning of fear. It stood before Mu Chen. Whether the opponent it was facing was a human body disaster or its sovereign realm, it would not hesitate to unleash all of its power. Therefore, the puppet took the initiative to break the silence. Boom! The ground slightly trembled as the puppet stepped out. The purple runes on its body instantly burst forth with dazzling light. The frightening spiritual energy ripples were like tidal waves as it exploded. Rustle! The puppet's charging figure disappeared in an instant. Mu Chen's facial expression changed as he knew that the puppet did not disappear. The speed of that puppet was too fast for the naked eyes. That puppet possessed extremely frightening speed. Raw? Although Mu Chen was startled by the puppet's speed, he was, after all, someone that possessed plentiful fighting experience. A shadow dragon appeared beneath his feet, and as the dragon roared, an afterimage appeared in his location and he retreated. Rustle. Wind was humming by his ears. As Mu Chen retreated, he focused his expression. The devouring dragon demonic spear in his hands brought along torrential killing intent as it became like a demonic python wreaking destruction. It flashed like lightning as it shot behind him. Bang! Bang! The space was torn apart under his spear as it left behind faint marks at the empty space. Ding! The devouring dragon demonic spear pierced towards an empty space. A metallic sound rang out as a black long spear shot forth to meet it. The tip of the spear was extremely precise as it clashed against the tip of the devouring dragon demonic spear. Black light surged and stopped Mu Chen's spear from moving any further forward. Boom! Black lightning surged from Mu Chen's body. His body seemed as if it had become taller. The 5 lightning runes on his body instantly appeared with power traveling throughout his muscles like waves. Rustle. Rustle. Mu Chen's expression was sharp as his arm trembled. Roars burst from the devouring dragon demonic spear. Spear images that filled the entire sky rained down like frightening lightning without the slightest bit of restraint of strength. Clearly Mu Chen did not hold himself back as he had utilized the penta-rune lightning physique. Furthermore, borrowing the might of the devouring dragon demonic spear, even spiritual energy disaster experts would not dare to take Mu Chen's storm-like attacks and could only hide. However, Mu Chen's opponent wasn't a spiritual energy disaster. It was a fighting puppet with the strength of spirit disaster without any fear nor emotions. Ding! Ding! Therefore, even when the puppet faced the attacks of Mu Chen, there weren't any traces of yielding. The spear in the puppet's hands was like a dragon as the spear images spread out. Every single image of the spear was like a light python as it clashed against the incoming attacks. This was simply a method of force meeting force. The storm of attacks from both sides clashed. Thereafter, it was silent again as the 2 attacks cancelled out. Outside the spiritual treasure mountain, the faces of Wen Qingxian, Luo Li, and the rest were grave as they exchanged looks between themselves. Although both sides appeared to be equal, Mu Chen was the one that attacked first. However, every single one of his attacks were blocked by the puppet without being able to take any step forward. Clearly, Mu Chen's battle would definitely be extremely intense. Ding! Ding! Seeing the spear images cancelling each other out, Mu Chen's gaze turned even sharper. The hand that was holding onto the devouring dragon demonic spear trembled. There was an impact from every single clash. If the devouring dragon demonic spear was not a peerless rank spiritual artifact and not for his physical body reaching the height of penta-rune lightning physique, he would have already been wounded from the earlier exchange. The strength of a first-grade spirit disaster was not on the same level compared to spiritual energy disaster. Ding! The earth-shattering amount of spear images disappeared as the 2 spearheads accurately clashed. Bang! A strong gale broke out and one could vaguely see the traces of an air explosion. The purple light within the eyes of the puppet suddenly flickered as the puppet suddenly let go of the spear. With a flash of black light, its figure appeared before Mu Chen like ghost. Thereafter, the puppet sent out a palm towards Mu Chen's chest, causing even the space around it to faintly ripple. The puppet had finally started to seize the initiative as it unleashed a powerful attack. The control of the fight that the puppet had was truly shocking. In the next instant, Mu Chen's attacks were thoroughly cancelled out. Mu Chen's face slightly changed. The dragon's image appeared beneath his feet again as he let go of the devouring dragon demonic spear and flew away in a black light. The puppet pursued as its palm was fixed onto Mu Chen as it came closer. There was no way Mu Chen could avoid that light palm. Faced with the undying pursuit, ferocity surged within Mu Chen's eyes. Since he could not avoid it, then face it. Boom! Boundless spiritual energy swept forth from Mu Chen's back. Starry skies appeared as 4 huge beasts rapidly appeared as Mu Chen threw his palm out. For God's constellation scripture. As Mu Chen barked, the 4 beast images roared as they turned into light and shot towards the puppet. Purple light flickered in the eyes of the puppet as the palm that had turned into a black light rustled as rampant spiritual energy clashed against the light seal. Boom! Heavy clashes resounded as a surge of spiritual energy gale swept out from the point of the collision, wreaking havoc. The light seal that seemed huge and sharp only lasted for a brief instant, before it was destroyed. The black palm broke the light as it clashed against Mu Chen's chest. Boom! Mu Chen's figure flew back as a heavy sound rang out from the palm. Outside the spiritual treasure mountain, clamor broke out. Mu Chen heavily landed on the ground as his figure rapidly retreated back. Both of his palms were heavily grasping the ground, causing the stone platform to crack. After drawing cracks of 100 feet on the ground, Mu Chen stabilized his body. When he raised his head after stabilizing his body, there was a trace of blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. However, a chilling light flashed through his black pupils. Rustle. The devouring dragon demonic spear appeared behind the puppet as killing intent surged. The sharp spearhead thrust towards the back of the puppet with a tricky angle. However, just when the devouring dragon demonic spear was about to stab the puppet abruptly turned around. It swept its leg out like a hammer, which caused the air to crack before it hit against the spearhead like lightning. Bang! The air trembled and the devouring dragon demonic spear was sent flying away with a kick from the puppet. However, the leg of the puppet was penetrated by the spear. Clearly, even though the body of the puppet was as hard as metal, it could not neglect the sharpness of a peerless rank spiritual artifact. The devouring dragon demonic spear turned into a streak of light as it flew across the sky before stopping behind Mu Chen, floating. Torrential aura was unleashed from it as it was like a ferocious python, unleashing its angered roar towards the puppet. Outside the spiritual treasure mountain, everyone held their breath as they watched the intense fight of those two. The slightest mistake could end up in heavy injuries. As shown, the puppet clearly had the advantage, since it had defeated all of Mu Chen's attacks. At the same time, the strength of a first-grade spirit disaster was revealed. Mu Chen must have been injured a little from the fight. If this goes on, he will definitely lose. Compared to spiritual energy disaster, spirit disaster is way too powerful. Furthermore, with the metallic body of the puppet, it far surpasses the physique of humans. When Qingxian said softly, Mu Chen's earlier performance was also exceptionally perfect. Facing such a powerful puppet, he could still advance and retreat. However, he could not counterattack. Although it was all blocked by the puppet in the end, he could already pretty much accomplish such feat with the cultivation of human body disaster. It truly is not easy. Luo Li also nodded her head. She did not admit that Mu Chen was in the disadvantage. Shortly after, she smiled, however, before the result is concluded, who knows who is in the advantage? Let's hope so. When Qingxian faintly replied as she watched Mu Chen's slender figure slowly stand up. Indeed, first-grade spirit disaster is really hard to handle. Mu Chen stood up as he said, wiping the traces of blood off the corner of his mouth. Boom! The eyes of the puppet were still flickering with purple light. There still wasn't any expression in its eyes as it looked at Mu Chen with indifference. The puppet stepped forward again, causing the ground to tremble when it was about to begin attacking again. Bang! The ground cracked as the puppet turned into a streak of black light, along with the aura of death. Rumble. Up in the sky, not knowing when, a rampant spiritual energy swept out as the sky turned a little more dark. Everyone could see 2 black light lotuses forming into a huge spiritual array. Shortly after, the light shrouded down, covering the entire region. Spiritual array? When Qingxuan's eyes narrowed as she continued, however, I'm afraid that a spiritual array at this level could not obstruct the first-grade spirit disaster puppet. 2 black lotuses quickly rotated as black light shot from the heart of the lotuses and converged together. It was like a cannon as it shot towards the puppet. However, facing with the attack of the spiritual energy, the body of the puppet stopped as it threw a punch out. The black light was like an untrained horse as it exploded from the punch that destroyed the black light along with the butchering demonic lotus spiritual array. When the fist of the puppet destroyed the spiritual array, its eyes lit up with dazzling purple light as it could sense a dangerous ripple. When it lowered its head, it saw that Mu Chen was forming peculiar seals single-handedly. As the seals formed, brilliant light burst forth from the countless colossal trees on the spiritual treasure mountain. Green lights shot out as they gathered towards Mu Chen's hand. Everyone was startled by the huge change of events, since they could sense a frightening ripple rapidly forming. The spiritual array was only a pretense. What's coming next is the real game, Luo Li softly said as she looked at the figure that was covered in green light. Up in the sky, a peculiar ripple appeared in the empty eyes of the light-figured elder as he watched Mu Chen absorbing the energy from thousands of trees. This episode ends here. Thank you for watching.